Hey everybody, this is Keith Ellison, your Minnesota Attorney General, the People's Lawyer, coming to you with another episode of Affording Your Life. You know what? It's always a pleasure to come together to talk about affording your life. This particular podcast is focused on working class economics. Economics like payday loans, dealing with your utility bills, dealing with the everyday prices that Americans have to confront every single day. We've been doing it for a long time, even way before the new political moment, but it's what we focus on. We look at what everyone can do to make sure that this economy works for working people, and that means everybody, elected officials, community, small business leaders, big business leaders, everyday people, everyone. I just want to introduce our show today by talking about what's going on in greater Minnesota. We're talking all about the work our office has been doing outside of the metropolitan area, all over the place, to help everyone afford their lives and ensure that we can all live with dignity, safety, and respect. In fact, just last week, we filed a lawsuit against Minnesota Valley Cooperative Light and Power Association, Minnesota Valley, because they illegally turned off the electrical service for a Minnesotan who requires electricity to power their life-sustaining medical equipment. This is not only illegal, it's not how you should treat each other. It's not how we should treat each other. And so we filed a lawsuit, and it was like after hours. It wasn't even during the regular business day. And we won a temporary restraining order, turning power back on. This case was filed in Yellow Medicine County and is just one example of the work we do here at the AGO to help Minnesotans, all Minnesotans, afford their lives. And now, let me introduce our guests. I'm joined today by Lee Atakpu, manager of the AGO Wage Theft Division, and Matthew Gladue, AGO Outreach Director. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, Matt, let's kick it off. You've been traveling across the state, you and I together. You know I've been there because I've been there with you, brother.
That's right.
And, I'd like to ask you, why are we going across the state of Minnesota to talk to Minnesotans about their biggest concerns? And what are some of the top issues we hear about from people?
Well, I think the sort of guiding philosophy in our office is nothing about us without us, right? And so, and as you say often, when we're out doing forums in greater Minnesota, like if you're a public official, you have a duty to meet with the public. And so we're out there, that's right, yeah. And so we're out there in every corner of the state, talking to folks. We've been, I hesitate to name all the places we've been because I'll leave places out, but I think we've done almost 30 forums.
Well, in the show notes, we're going to put our little map.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. That'll
everything.
show people. Yeah.
So we're going to put that. So, hey, you
so
guys
we've got,
keep reading, keep scrolling down and read the show notes so you can see all the places we've been.
That's right. We want to
maybe invite us to a place near.
Yeah. That's right. We'll go just about any place and have gone lots of places. So yeah, that's why we're doing it. And, thinking about the issues that people raise, I think one of the things at top of mind is healthcare, right? So all the changes that were made to Medicare and Medicaid in House File 1 and a lot of concerns about rural hospitals and their future and rural clinics. So we're hearing a lot about that. Hearing a lot about federal overreach. They know the administration is acting without regard to the rule of law, and they are seeing it touch down in their lives, whether that's in concern over their trans neighbor or watching the federal government trying to honestly extort Minnesota, on programs like basic programs that working people need, like SNAP, education funding, childcare funding, things like that.
And we've heard plenty about how these tariffs have disrupted bean growers' export markets and how they've increased the prices of stuff like, fertilizer.
Yep.
And we've also heard about how the cancellation of some of these programs where from the farm to table type programs where farmers will grow vegetables, grow livestock to put into food shelves or into local schools. These programs have been discontinued. It's been very disruptive.
It was an important part of sort of the budget that farmers would put together, and now it's gone. So we're hearing this is interesting because it's called Metro Surge, or as I've heard some people call it, Metro Siege, but it wasn't just in the metro area.
Right.
We're hearing lots of concerns from folks. We were in New Ulm, and there were people there from St. James who said 25% of the workforce had been affected by this. So think about that. Think about how that affects working people. Think about how that affects the small business owners in that community. So it's touching down. And then, we heard this really powerful testimony from a woman in St. James who was trying to protect her neighbors.
Yeah.
And got surrounded and frankly assaulted by ICE, right?
Terrorized.
Yeah.
It was really but we've been to New Ulm, we've been to around St. James, we've been to Wilmer, we've been all over the place.
And down to Fairmont, down to Winona, yep, all over.
And we'll come to your neighborhood. Let us
Oh,
know.
yeah. So the two other things that we're hearing a lot about the midterm elections. People are concerned about, how do we make sure that people are able to vote and that those votes are going to count. And then lastly, a lot about data centers, where people are concerned about the environmental impact for sure, but they're also concerned about local democracy. I mean,
Right.
we've been hearing about, attempts to get local governments to sign NDAs with the folks that are trying to build these data centers, and there's just a lot of concern about that. So those are, that's not an exhaustive list, but that's just some of what we're hearing about out there.
Yeah, this stuff we've been hearing about a lot of things, especially those things. And Lee, you lead the wage theft division here at the AG's office, which is part of a larger consumer action division here at the AGO. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you do overall and some of the cases you've done which have protected the wages of people outside of the metropolitan area?
Yeah, absolutely. And, wage theft or labor exploitation, whatever you want to call it, certainly labor trafficking doesn't know any bounds. It doesn't
Right.
have borders. It doesn't just focus on the metro area. It's throughout Minnesota. Our work, of course, we're bound by the borders of the state of Minnesota. These are the people that we're serving. And so, I guess in that sense, but we hear about it and we see it all over. And so these are things like violations of overtime, violations of people not being paid over minimum wage. Of course, misclassification is a issue that we see throughout the state, in the metro area, but certainly in greater Minnesota as well. Tip pooling is a big area that we've seen. Traps is a new...
Traps, what is that?
Traps are training repayment agreement provisions.
That's right.
And a trap is essentially an agreement within a contract that an employer asks an employee to sign, and oftentimes they don't even know what they're signing, what they're getting into, but they're signing this document that basically says if you are leaving this employment before your time here or before a certain period of time passes, you're going to owe us money back. And they try to tie it to the cost of training, but in reality, what we're seeing is that a lot of times it's not actually tied to any specific numbers or costs that the employer is incurring. So it functions as a way to force workers to stay at a job that they may not want to stay at for longer.
Well, let me just say, if you go to the last episode of Affording Your Life,
That's right.
We're talking about traps in that episode, so learn all about it in our prior episode.
That's right. But some of the things that we've seen, and again, one of the big cases that our office has seen, and we're still dealing with, even in the civil division. So our office, the Consumer Protection Section, we do civil enforcement. So we're enforcing labor laws, consumer laws throughout the state, non-criminal laws, and in my division specifically for wage theft, of course. There's the criminal side, and there's some overlap. Sometimes there's criminal wage theft that occurs as well. But one of the cases that's overlapped and been in both areas has been Evergreen, and very well the history of Evergreen and the terrible actions that the owner took there, and the way that they were treating these workers. And it's one of those cases where it kind of covers so many different areas of or different violations that you could almost teach a course just on the work that was what happened there. But ultimately, what we were able to do, and maybe just to give the listeners a brief review, Evergreen was a situation where it's a dairy farm that straddles a couple of counties in central Minnesota. They were hiring workers and they weren't paying them. They weren't paying them their first checks. Sometimes they weren't paying them their last check. They were not paying them the full amounts. And then they were living in housing on the farms that was really not habitable. It was really not something that anyone would want to live in.
It kind of feels like a slave thing, man. I mean, you make them come work on your farm and they live on your farm, and then you they charged them for the housing.
That's right. They were deducting rent from these houses that many of them weren't even actual houses. Some of the places that they were living, I wouldn't consider an actual house in the state. The law doesn't. They didn't have each room. A bedroom wouldn't have the window that was required. It wouldn't have smoke detectors. It wouldn't have functioning plumbing. Right. So all of these things, and so. That was a case where we were able to stop the action, stop the exploitation that was happening of these workers, but and bring some money back, some pay back wages for these workers as well. Again, this is something that we see across the state. I don't want to say that this is unique to just Evergreen situation or to these particular workers. This type of activity is something that we see throughout the state and with other locations where we want to make sure that we're always open to playing the role that we play, the legal role that we play to make sure that happens. Another case that we actually resolved was ConAgra, and ConAgra it's a fruit and vegetable processing facility in Waseca, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is they would bring labor from outside of the state, migrant labor from outside of the state, and they would bring them into Minnesota to work in this facility. And what's required by the law is that they provide them notice, information about the work that they're going to be doing. So you need to talk about the type of work that they're doing, the dates of that employment actually begins, when the employee should arrive at the work site, how much money the employee will earn, whether housing will be provided. I mean, this is stuff that if you are coming from another state and you're coming to work in Minnesota, we say you need to know that employers need to tell workers about this, and it's for good reason, because the picking season, the growing season, that has very specific dates. And if someone comes up here 3 weeks early and they don't have housing and they're not starting working yet and they don't have a job, they're kind of just sitting on their hands and they're losing money, and it could be very expensive for them to do. So you need to provide all this information to folks in advance, and ConAgra was not doing that. So we started an investigation. We brought it. We worked with actually ConAgra to get them to change their practices to make sure that they were doing it, and then we came to a monetary settlement of $142,000 to make sure that some of that money that was going back to workers, or that we had, actually all of it was distributed to workers to make sure that they, if there were any costs or expenses that they endured as a result of that this would act as a way to provide some relief to these workers.
So let me just say, all this work we do on wage theft, we do it all over the state, not just the metro, which is what you're talking about. And it's important to remember that most employers, like nearly all, do the right thing and pay their workers right. When an employer doesn't, you're not only taking money out of that family budget, you're actually getting a competitive advantage over your competitors who play by the rules. So wage thieving companies should do not consider this something that is against the business community. This is against people who don't play by the rules that other businesses do play by. And it's against workers who work hard to provide value for that company. So thanks for the work that you're doing there and your whole team.
Absolutely.
Definitely want to give your whole team a big shout out. So Matt, back in April, me and you, man, we be rolling all over this joint. We visited with the Minnesota Farmers Union to talk about different things that are of pressing concerns to farmers. We talked to farmers about the cost of living, about accessing health care, about the tariffs, the Trump tariffs, driving up costs of resources needed to run their farms. Can you talk a little bit about some things you heard from the folks that we sat down with?
Yeah. So we were in the big gathering room at the American Legion in Wilmer, and heard a lot about tariffs for sure. Heard a lot about the impact of the war in Iran on the bottom line of farmers.
Sure.
Right? Fertilizer costs going up exponentially. Imagine, Keith, so you and I, when we go to pay for gas, right?
Yeah.
We already see that bump. Now
You mean the $4.50 I've been paying?
Now imagine that increase, but on the scale of a sizable farm,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's tens of thousands of dollars added to the expense side of the ledger for those folks. So we heard about that.
And they already start with small margins.
That's right. I mean, farmers operate on really thin margins, and this is not helping. And we heard some about that. we heard
driving
some
folks out of business.
That's right. Yeah.
I think there's been around 1,200 farms that have gone out of business in the
Isn't
last
that
couple of
incredible?
years.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Do you mind talking a little bit about like what that means to a farm family? Maybe they've had the farm in their family for a few generations.
I mean, first of all, it's heartbreaking to hear the stories because you've got families that, yeah, as you said, have had these farms in their families for generations, and they're trying to sustain a business in a world where there's so much that is outside of their control. Right. And so people will tell you the numbers on the ledger sheet, like their expenses and things like that. But you can just also see the strain that it's causing them in the way that they talk in their bodies, right? Like this is just, it's stressful for them. And we hear about that every time we're meeting with farmers and talking with farmers. We've been hearing a lot about consolidation in agriculture, especially in the dairy industry. But I'll tell you the thing that really struck me most, Keith, was, so there we are, we're in Willmar, Minnesota, and I live 2 miles, maybe a little less from HCMC. And it's an urban hospital. I drive by it all the time when I'm downtown, and I think about it as like an urban hospital I can go to.
Sure.
So there we are in Willmar, and you talked about what we're doing to protect HCMC, what we're doing to fight for it. And
This highly urbanized place.
Right. And the room broke into applause.
Right.
And it took me aback, right? Like, and then, so people didn't just applaud, then they, there was time for question and answer toward the end of when you spoke, but these people wanted in right away.
Yeah.
And so you had one woman raise her hand and say, I was a nurse. I can't remember. They're basically the nurses on the choppers that fly out and bring people back from, farm accidents or major heart attacks or other health events. And the helicopter goes out to that rural place and takes them back to HCMC to get some of the best care in the state, right?
Yep.
Another woman talked about a family member who had been on one of those helicopters, right? And they are really aware that most doctors in the state of Minnesota, they get trained in the state of Minnesota, go through HCMC at some point.
Sure.
And there are a lot of folks that want to say there's this urban-rural divide.
Right.
Well, I will tell you that afternoon in that American Legion Hall, there was no divide. There was some deep solidarity.
No, that's
among
true,
those
man.
folks.
That's the thing that strikes me a lot of times where we're running around is people will often stop me when we're in greater Minnesota and say, oh, my daughter lives in the cities, or I used to live in the cities. One guy told me, hey, you're from the north side, aren't you, of Minneapolis? I'm like, yeah, I live on the north side. I grew up on the north side. I just wanted to hear the birds sing, so I moved out here to Brown County or Morrison County or somewhere like that, or Lake of the Woods County, somewhere like that. And so people from the urban area move to the rural area. People from the rural area move to the urban area, or their family members do. There is a lot of interchange between the two.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So look, any final reflections, guys? Any thoughts about engaging greater Minnesota? I'll mention this. Our antitrust group is working on AgriStats, which is something to help farmers get fairer prices because this algorithmically driven sort of unfair, uncompetitive advantage that some of these companies get because of AgriStats. We're also pursuing the John Deere case, which is a right to repair matter. And there's other cases we mentioned, Syngenta case, and we're always looking for ways to do things to balance the scales, to stand up against corporate concentration, to make sure workers are getting treated fairly. But any final thoughts that you all just want to share as we wrap up this important segment about the AGO and us engaging Greater Minnesota?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, we are all living in this world where, and you already alluded to it, how everything is more expensive for business owners, for businesses. It's not getting easier. It's not getting, the margins are getting thinner. And that is all, that's not news to any of us and something that we're not aware of. At the same time, what we expect is that you're not weighing that on the backs of the workers, that the workers there still are, obviously legal protections for them. But even just from a human's perspective, it's not something that the workers should be enduring or needing to hold on their own or carry themselves. So, and one thing that I would absolutely say is we deal with a lot of workers, businesses and workers who, when they see that this is happening to them and they don't know what next to do, and then finally we have an investigation, what we're oftentimes doing is we're not trying to just, what we're trying to do initially is stop the behavior, and then if we can get money back for workers, that's the money that they earn, so they should get it. But we're not trying to, sink businesses. We're not trying to put farms out of business or anything like that. So that's one important thing. And then the only other thing I would say is to Greater Minnesota and anyone listening on this, reach out to our office. Get on our website. You can find our complaint forms. We want to hear from workers. If there is, if you feel like you might be being taken advantage or exploited, or that the laws aren't being followed, absolutely reach out to us, because we see you and we hear you, and we're getting hundreds of these complaints, but we are reviewing all of them, and we are making sure that we are getting out there and protecting workers wherever and whenever we can.
Thanks a lot.
I just have two quick thoughts. One is, the concentration of corporate power is touching down in the lives of every single Minnesotan. And, again, regardless of whether they live here in the metro area or out in rural Minnesota. And I think, all of us doing more to understand that and understand what we can do to fight together to tilt the power back to people, super important. And then the only other final thought is, I like being here in the Capitol. I think we like working here, but we like it even better when we get to go out and talk with folks. So, reach out to us. We've been to so many places, but we'll go wherever because we want to hear from you, and we want to hear what's going on in your life and what we can do to help you afford it.
That's right. So we believe that affording your life is definitely something we're trying to help happen in Greater Minnesota. So give us a call. If you are from the suburban or urban areas, know that there's not that much, the issues are not that different. They're not the same, but they're also not that different. And also appreciate there's certain challenges being remote presents to you, like doctor visits, particularly mental health and obstetrics. Understand that in Greater Minnesota that people not everybody's doing farm work. Some people are doing wage workers. And also understand that there have been a lot of price shocks for people, and there have been, and this issue of corporate consolidation is serious, and that the fragility of healthcare is a big, big deal. And if you're worried about the HCMC, and of course, hats off to the legislators who helped stabilize HCMC, but if you're looking at that fragility there, you better believe it's also going on in your rural communities. We care about it. We want to do something about it. Give us a call. So, hey, everybody, that's it for today. Big thanks to Lee Atakpu and Matthew Gladhue. Thank you guys for joining us. And I want to say thank you to all of y'all who tune in to Affording Your Life. And remember to rate, review, and share this show with your friends and family. Smash that like button if you can, and come on in for the next edition of Affording Your Life, where we talk about economics that applies to you. Not just the Dow Jones Industrial Average or what's cracking on Wall Street, although we get into that too. But we're talking about economics that impact your life and your family every day and all the time. Thank y'all very much. We'll see you next time.